Ever notice how you can read something 5 times and still forget it the next day, but one quick review at the right moment makes it stick for weeks? That's not luck. That's your brain being rewired. Spaced repetition taps into how memory actually works, strengthening the exact neural pathways that keep information alive. In the next few minutes, you'll see why timing your reviews matters more than cramming, and how a simple shift can turn forgettable facts into lasting knowledge. Spaced repetition strengthens neural pathways by revisiting information just before you forget it. That timing is everything, because your brain treats slightly difficult recall as a signal that the memory matters, and it responds by reinforcing the connections between neurons. Think about the last time you almost forgot someone's name but then managed to remember it. That little struggle actually made it stick better afterward. When you review material too soon, your brain barely has to work, so the pathway doesn't get stronger. Wait too long, and the connection fades too much. The sweet spot is right before forgetting, when recall feels effortful but possible. You can apply this by spacing your study sessions. Review something later, the same day, then a day later, then a few days later, then a week. Apps like Anki automate this, but you can also do it with a simple calendar or notebook. Each time you successfully recall the information, you're literally thickening and stabilizing the neural pathway. Over time, what once felt difficult becomes automatic, because the brain has rewired itself to treat that information as important and worth keeping. Each spaced review triggers myelination, making recall faster and more automatic over time. Myelin is like insulation around the wires in your brain, helping signals travel faster and more efficiently. When you repeatedly activate a neural pathway through spaced recall, your brain responds by adding more myelin to that pathway. The result is that what once took effort starts to feel instant. Think about how you learn to read or drive. At first, it was slow and clumsy, but with repetition spaced over time, it became second nature. The same process applies to facts, concepts, and skills. If you cram, you might temporarily activate the pathway, but you don't give your brain enough time to build that insulation. With spaced repetition, you're telling your brain, this is worth optimizing. A practical way to use this is to test yourself. Instead of rereading, close your notes and try to recall key ideas, even if it feels uncomfortable. That effort is what drives myelination. Over weeks, you'll notice that recall becomes quicker and more reliable because your brain has physically upgraded the pathway. Forgetting is not failure, but a necessary step that makes memory reconsolidation stronger. It might feel frustrating when you can't remember something you studied, but that gap is actually part of how learning works. When you forget and then successfully retrieve the information, your brain rebuilds the memory in a more durable form. This process is called reconsolidation, and it strengthens the neural network each time it happens. Imagine editing a document multiple times. The final version becomes clearer and more refined. Your brain does something similar with memories. If you never allow yourself to forget a little, you miss out on this strengthening process. That's why cramming feels productive but fades quickly, while spaced repetition leads to long-term retention. A helpful habit is to embrace that slight discomfort during recall. If you hesitate before answering, that's a good sign. Instead of immediately checking the answer, give yourself a few seconds to think. That effort tells your brain to rebuild the pathway more robustly. Over time, those moments of almost forgetting turn into strong, reliable memories that stick with you. Spacing study sessions reduces cognitive overload and allows the brain to consolidate memories during rest. When you try to learn too much at once, your brain gets overwhelmed, and much of that information never makes it into long-term storage. Spacing gives your brain breathing room to process what you've learned. During sleep and even quiet rest, your brain replays and organizes information, strengthening connections and filtering out what's less important. This is why reviewing material across multiple days is far more effective than a single long session. For example, studying for 30 minutes over 4 days is usually better than cramming for 2 hours in one night. You can support this process by scheduling shorter, focused sessions and prioritizing sleep afterward. Avoid the temptation to push through fatigue, because tired brains don't consolidate well. Even taking short breaks between sessions helps. By giving your brain time to recover and process, you're making each study session more impactful. and you're helping those neural pathways stabilize instead of getting lost in the noise of overload. Using spaced repetition with active recall transforms passive knowledge into deeply encoded, usable memory. Passive review, like rereading or highlighting, can make you feel familiar with information, but that doesn't mean you can actually use it. Active recall forces you to pull information out of your brain without cues, which is exactly how you'll need it in real life. When you combine this with spacing, you repeatedly challenge your brain to reconstruct the memory, making it stronger and more flexible. Think about preparing for an exam or learning a new skill. You don't just want to recognize the answer, you want to produce it. A simple way to do this is to turn your notes into questions. Instead of reading a definition, ask yourself, can I explain this in my own words? Or, can I teach this to someone else? Then, revisit those questions over increasing intervals. You'll notice that what started as vague familiarity becomes clear, confident knowledge. This is when the brain has truly rewired itself, turning information into something you can recall, apply, and build on effortlessly.